5.
I'm so scared. I just don't know what to do. It all started a few days ago. Now I'm sitting alone in my basement praying to God. Whatever is outside will just turn around and leave me alone. On July the 25th, I accessed the deep web for the first time after downloading the Tor browser and toying with the idea, but being far too much of a pansy to actually go through with it. On that day though, I manned up and I went for it. What's the harm, right? I avoided clicking on anything that didn't have a description on a list of websites. Eventually going to the hidden wiki because it had provided a little bit more information on what I would be clicking on. I only read, never clicked on anything out of fear of what would happen. That is, of course, until I came across a website advertising hitman services. I would never ever hire a hitman for any reason, but I thought to myself that there was no way that was a real thing. I went ahead and clicked the link and read through the website, reading the prices for different services, beatings, killings made to look like suicide, murder and accident, maiming, so many options for so many different types of people. I got a little freaked out and minimised the browser, closing my laptop and moving on with my day. When I got home later that evening, I powered my laptop back up and did typical teenager things. Music downloading, Reddit, Facebook, you know. Eventually I passed out and didn't hear my laptop hit the carpet or anything. The next day I went about my regular schedule, never even looking at my laptop until the 28th, so yesterday. I opened Tor again in the afternoon and let my curiosity get the best of me. I opened it to a full screen which earned me a warning about how it could make tracking me down easier. Not sure how, since my IP address is in Stockholm and I'm nowhere near there. But I shrugged it off and kept scrolling through the wiki. I got curious again and went back to the Hitman site, but it was gone. I've checked the listings and everything. The website is completely gone. A little freaked out but not really worried, I moved on and back to the regular internet. This brings us to now. I was about to settle down and go to bed when I heard something very unnerving. The crickets and frogs were almost completely silent. I lived in the country and the crickets and frogs around my house are wicked loud at night, but there were very few sounds coming in through the windows. I sat still and listened for an hour, and they slowly began to get louder and louder, so I assumed the danger was gone. Now fully awake, I pulled up my laptop, feeling a little anxious because of the warnings I got while browsing the deep web yesterday. In the past 5 minutes, a few things have happened. First, my Tor browser was open and running, even though I had closed it. Second, my webcam was on. Third, the crickets and frogs are still going and there's someone gently on my bedroom door. My basement bedroom door. The threat never left. The threat just somehow moved inside my house. I'm typing this from my phone in my closet, trying desperately not to lose my mind. I'm trapped, guys, and I don't know what's happening. Please help me. Please help me.
4.
This is what happened to my husband and I one night at around 1 AM in August 1990. We did question our sanity at the time. I will give as much detail as my old memory will allow. We had enjoyed a day out in Great Yarmouth, a rare treat as the in-laws were babysitting our 2-month-old baby. We were travelling back along a road. You will have to excuse me as I'm not a driver and did not take much notice of the route, but I'm sure it was the main road. We were going back to Hertfordshire, so I guess it was the A11. I remember feeling very tired all of a sudden and very warm. I felt myself dozing off, which was very unusual as I have never been able to sleep on journeys. I actually kept falling asleep, and the only thing which kept waking me was my husband Tony cursing. I happened to pull myself out of this lethargic state, and I looked ahead of me as Tony kept braking the car violently. What I saw I will never forget. Just about 2 feet ahead of the car bonnet appeared some sort of stone wall. It was kind of silvery greyish. I know this sounds really weird, but every time he braked in order to avoid hitting it, it disappeared. Again, I felt myself almost passing out. When I next awoke, ahead were 4 figures just ahead of our car. I recall they looked very small, almost as if they were lower than the car. They were hooded, just side profiles, but they were of the same silvery grey colour as the stone wall I mentioned. Tony braked as the car got nearer to them, and they just seemed to disintegrate like silver dust. I think I must have blacked out again, but I do recall opening my eyes and looking out my side window and seeing that. Well, it's difficult to explain, but it was as if the main road had gone and that we were driving through some sort of mud track, as if we were lower down in height. I remember feeling very disorientated at the time, and at the same time kind of stupid. Not sure if I were dreaming all of this, and also reluctant to speak of it to Tony, for fear that he would think that I've gone crazy. As it was, we somehow, I don't recall how, got back onto the right track and found our way home, thank God. Once home I mentioned to him that I had, during our journey home through Thetford, the strangest dream. He asked, "Did you see that wall and the monk figures in the road?" We spoke about the whole scenario and both saw exactly the same things, whatever they were, but through a mutual fear of seeming crazy, we had both kept silent at the time. Tony told me that he had an overwhelming urge to fall asleep while driving down that road. We had seen the same strange things during the journey along the Thetford road, which, although it made us feel better to know that we were not going mad, it was something that we could never explain. I have told close friends over the years of my experience of that strange night 25 years ago, but I don't think that they really believe me. But then, I can hardly believe it myself in retrospect. We should have written it down at the time.
3.
I am a single mum who works very hard and tries to divide my time with work and kids. I often thought up games to play with the kids, especially in the winter when it's so cold that you can't really go out to play, and in the evenings we used to play nighttime hide and seek in the house. We spent most of the day setting up little hiding places throughout the house with blankets over chairs. Well, I was the one who drew the short straw to count first for the kids. I often would count and just listen to make sure they had all hidden properly, and also to see which area of the house they were in. This night was different. I guess they learned to be too quiet. I couldn't figure out where they were. I went into the laundry, the restroom, the kitchen, to no luck. Then I went into the first bedroom. I said, "Are you kids in here?" Sometimes the youngest would giggle, and I could catch them all, but no sound. Then I saw an arm illuminated in the night, pointing in an area of the room. I thought that it was my oldest girl's arm at first, showing where her sister was. However, when I looked in the hiding place, I found my oldest daughter and the little one together. My son was in a hall closet. I realised a ghost had pointed the way to find the girls. I was scared, but for the kids' benefits I decided to just laugh it off that I got extra help. We never played again because the kids accused me of cheating. I am not sure why the spirit showed me where the girls were hiding, if it was playing or was worried about the girls, but it was very unsettling.
2.
The scariest encounter I have ever experienced as a paranormal investigator was when something followed me home from an investigation. For 4 nights after, I kept waking up between 2:45 and 3 AM. after having the same dream. The dream was of a girl in a white dress with black hair. She was dripping wet from head to toe, like she had just been under water. I could not see her face, as her tangled black hair was in the way. The dream wasn't long, a split second I guess. I would be in my bed, lying on my back, and I would feel wet hair on my face, as she was leaning over me on the bed, and as if her hair touched my face. I would awake in complete terror. Then I would hear noises downstairs. I thought on the first night it was my son, who had a bedroom directly under my room. Rather than going down, I put my feet on the floor and banged on the floor to let him know I was awake and mad at him for being up at 3 AM when he had school in the morning. He was only 11 years old at the time. Their response was an extremely loud bang on the floor under my feet. I thought it was him, and I was going down to give him a telling off. I walked down the stairs quickly into his room, and to my surprise, he was fast asleep. I then heard noises coming from my kitchen. I thought we had an intruder. And checked that no one was in the house. This continued for 3 more nights, till the 4th night after having the same dream and hearing knocks downstairs. I walked down the stairs again and checked all the doors and windows to make sure no one had entered my house. I could not find anything out of the ordinary. I went to the fridge to get a bottle of water, and just as I was about to open it, that's when the feeling hit me. I became afraid. Cold shiver. Something was standing behind me. I knew it wasn't human. The fear I felt wasn't anything I have ever experienced before. Complete terror. Every hair on my body stood up on end. I couldn't turn around, as I knew there and then that if I turned around, I would be scared to death. I just shouted as loud as I could, "You're not welcome in my house, leave!" I kept saying this about 4 or 5 times, and the terror went away. I never had the dream again, and never heard those noises in my house again. I will never forget that feeling. I often wonder what I would have seen if I turned around that night, but something in me didn't want me to see whatever it was. This is a true story. I guess I will never know why I had the dreams and heard these noises, but I often question myself as to why I didn't turn around, being an investigator and all. But that primal fear I felt was something that I guess I couldn't control. Fear froze me.
1.
I work for a certain airline in the UK, which has been going for many decades. The airline was originally founded in 1962, and over those years, it has been rebranded many times and has merged with other airlines to create the one we know today. We currently operate a fleet of Boeing aircraft, but used to have Airbus as well. Although these have gone now, we have the Boeing B373, B757, B767 and B787 aircraft. Many aircraft have joined and left the fleet over the years, but there is one that many of the crew know well. In 2008, the airline was rebranded when 2 well-known airlines merged. When flying now, if you were crew before 2008, you will be from one of the 2 sides. We affectionately refer to these sides as X-Blue and X-Pink. One of the old X-Pink B767s is infamous with some crew. To fully explain this, I'll need to teach you a bit of airline terminology. A ferry flight is when an aircraft is flown from one destination to another with no passengers on board, only the crew members. An outbound flight will be the first one for the crew that day. For UK-based crew, this is from the UK to their destination. An inbound flight is one that is coming back to the base airport in the UK. To crew members, these are known as sectors, with the outbound sector being followed by the inbound sector. When using this aircraft in the daytime, everything was completely normal. However, at night, things went a bit strange. There are many stories of aircraft being haunted, as unfortunately people do die on board of natural causes now and again. With this B767, however, whenever you used it for a night flight or a night ferry flight, things became borderline scary. The flight that everyone talks about was just before the aircraft was due to leave the company. It was a flight between a southern UK airport and a popular holiday destination in Europe. The outbound sector had a full load of passengers on board. The inbound, however, would be a ferry flight, as the aircraft was returning to another base to be used on a different route the next day. The inbound flight was due to land back around 2 AM, which would mean that the aircraft would be flying through the night. The crew knew what this meant for them, as they had heard stories, but they had to operate the flight. Once the aircraft had taken off MR and reached cruising altitude, the cabin crew relaxed and talked in their respective galleys at either end of the aircraft. About an hour into the flight, things started to happen. Call bells would ring, which requires you to press the button at the seat. The B767 is good in that respect, because you can turn the call bells off from the galleys. The crew, knowing that no passengers were on board, cancelled the call bell, but made a note of where it was, so that engineers could look at it once back on the ground. A few minutes later, another bell went off. This continued throughout the flight, but was more annoying than anything. It was only when the galley curtains started moving on their own that the crew became very uneasy. As you are on an aircraft, you can't blame it on gusts of wind, as there isn't any. The toilets would flush on their own when nobody was occupying them. Tray tables would unfold. Safety cards and magazines would be taken out of seat pockets, thrown on the floor or seats. Overhead lockers would open on their own. Seat belts would fasten themselves, and footsteps could be heard and felt through the floor walking along the aisles. As crew, we knew what sounds we were likely to hear and what we aren't. These are all things we hear on a daily basis, but not when there aren't any passengers on board. It was only when a cart in the galley was pulled from a stowage that the crew completely freaked out. The carts are held in their stowage by latches that need to be moved out of the way before you can move the cart. On top of this, all carts have brakes that are put on, so that even if the cart should become unsecured, it cannot move. These carts can weigh up to 300 pounds, and moving one is no easy task. For one to be pulled out of the stowage, the brake would have had to be taken off, which has an audible click, and the latches would have had to be moved, these also being audibly noticeable. The crew members didn't hear anything of the cart being unsecured and didn't notice until it was pulled out. Once the flight landed back, the crew made reports of everything that had happened on board. They knew this wasn't the first time things had happened, and knew that things would happen again. Not just crew members had strange things happen to them in this aircraft though. Passengers would also report people walking past them while they're trying to get to sleep. Cleaners would have these things happen while they're cleaning the aircraft overnight, and the baggage handlers could hear people walking overhead in the cabin when nobody was on board. The aircraft has since left the company, although I'm not sure if it has been taken out of service and scrapped, or if it's still in service with another terrified airline.